Hi everybody, today we are going to be talking about First Nephi chapter 2 verse 11. Now this he spake because of the stiff-neckedness of Laman and Lemuel, for behold they did murmur in many things against their father, because he was a visionary man, and had led them out of the land of Jerusalem to leave the land of their inheritance, and their gold and their silver and their precious things to perish in the wilderness. And this they said he had done because of the foolish imaginations of his heart. So it was hard to read that sentence. It's been corrected from the original printer's manuscript to make it a little easier to read, but it's still hard to read that sentence because the grammar is bad. So we're going to look at why the grammar is so bad in this verse. So stay tuned. The glaring problem with the grammar in this verse is called polysyndeton. Polysyndeton is the repeated use of coordinating conjunctions like and. So here on the right, I have a picture of the actual printer's manuscript. This is from the Joseph Smith papers. This is Oliver Cowdery as the scribe, and you'll see the underlined portion is where the polysyndeton starts, where it says leave the land of their inheritance, and then he uses the ampersand sign anytime he writes and. That was a signature of Oliver's, that we know that he was the one translating. So he uses the ampersand, and their gold, ampersand, and their silver, ampersand, and their precious things, ampersand, to perish, and to perish in the wilderness, ampersand, this, that they, ... So, well, this is the printer's manuscript. In the version of the Book of Mormon that we have now, they eliminate the fourth and. So, in your scriptures, it probably reads, leave the land of their inheritance, and their gold, and their silver, and their precious things, period, to perish in the wilderness, and this, that they, ... So, they clean it up by not making it a run-on sentence, eliminating one of the ands, and we're still left with a small polysyndeton of and their gold and their silver and their precious things, where in English we would have put comma, comma, and their precious things, using and on the very last part of the list, but using commas in the other places. So here, from the direct translation to the printer's manuscript, we have a huge run-on sentence, a polysyndeton, with tons of ampersands or ands that separate this list of items to discuss. It was either 1879 or the 1920 edition dropped the fourth and, like I said. So the one we have now doesn't contain that fourth and. So who was editing this? So Oliver Cowdery was the scribe. Joseph Smith was the translator. So as far as we know, Joseph Smith read the translation to Oliver Cowdery, who, mind you, had become a school teacher at this point. As the main scribe, Oliver Cowdery began preparing the printer's manuscript in August 1829. So the printer's manuscript that we have is actually a copy of the actual manuscript. So Oliver Cowdery would have gone and made a copy of his actual writings in First Nephi. In 1837, Joseph Smith himself went through and made grammatical adjustments to the Book of Mormon. So Oliver himself had a chance originally to say, Joseph, this is a terrible sentence. Let's rearrange the ands or add commas or whatever we need to do. And for whatever reason, they didn't do it at the time. Oliver Cowdery then went back through and made a printer's manuscript, left all the ands in there, left the run-on sentence, left the polysyndeton, left it all in. And then Joseph Smith himself, on 3 different occasions, after being criticized that the grammar was so bad in the Book of Mormon, went through and made small grammatical adjustments to the Book of Mormon. But no changes were made by Joseph or Oliver in their lifetime to this verse. Why? Why wasn't it changed? And if it wasn't changed, why did the writers of the Book of Mormon, whoever you believe the writer of the Book of Mormon to be, why did they speak so poorly? Why did they continue with these ands and these run-on sentences? Well, as most of you probably know, ancient Hebrew did not contain vowels or punctuation, and many times still Hebrew writing that's written to people who are well versed in Hebrew will omit the vowels. But the Masoretes were a group of Jewish scribes and scholars who worked at the end of the 5th through the 10th centuries AD. They were the first ones to add punctuation to the Hebrew Bible. So to any Hebrew text, really, they went through and added punctuation. So it's more of a modern addition to the language of Hebrew to add punctuation. So if this is an authentic Hebrew text, there would not have been punctuation. There would not have been a comma to separate sentences or ideas. So the way that an ancient Hebrew writer would separate ideas is with a wa or a vav. It's a 6th letter in Semitic languages, including Hebrew, and this is the picture of the letter, and it's used as a conjunction for multiple nouns. So if you're making a list of things, you would put this wa or vav before each word. So it's not its own word. It would be connected to the front of the word as you read from right to left in Hebrew. They would become a new word, essentially. So, and gold and silver and their precious things would all be words, and that would give you the sense of and, or that would give you the idea of a list of things being used. That's how Hebrew text was written. They didn't have like I said, they didn't have commas. So this is actually a very, very good, authentic Hebrew translation. It gets even more interesting as I dug into it. So a conjunctive conjunction simply joins two words, phrases, sentences together, and is usually translated as and in English. So this is what we talk about, and gold and silver and precious things. But the second way you can use this exact same letter at the beginning of a word would be in a contrastive conjunction. Contrast two words, phrases, sentences as different in some way, and is usually translated as but. So this idea of but or however or something, this caused this opposite effect. So then we look at, so here's the Hebrew translation. If we go from English back to Hebrew, you can see this is the sans serif version of the letter. So you can see the very first letter of each of these words is where the and is. So and their gold, and their silver, and their precious things, and to perish in the wilderness, and this that they. And to perish in the wilderness, that's where the grammar really gets bad, right? And to perish in the wilderness, that's where the editors of the 1920 or the 1879 versions of the Book of Mormon said, we can't be having this and in here. So they took the and out, made it a period, and then started a new sentence. Take into context that this letter, this same exact letter, can be a contrastive conjunction. Then all of a sudden we can read this a little bit differently. We can say their inheritance and their gold and their silver and their precious things, but only to perish in the wilderness. And all of a sudden that makes a ton more sense. That and is actually a but to perish in the wilderness. I think that this is very authentic. It's a very authentic translation. Whether we use and or but there, I think it translates much better back into Hebrew than it does from Hebrew into English. So here's the alternate translation that we could have. Leave the land of their inheritance and their gold and their silver and their precious things, but to perish in the wilderness. This that they might. So Hebrew or English text. So the use of this polysyndeton happens in less than 1% of conjunctions in English literature. Literally less than 1. It happens sometimes to show emphasis. William Shakespeare used it once. A few English literary scholars have used it, but typically it's looked at as bad grammar. In Hebrew, it is used 100% of the time when making a list. So if we're looking at the chances that Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery wrote this document out of their own mind into an English document, less than 1% chance that they would have used a polysyndeton. And if it's a Hebrew text that was written by a Hebrew writer, translated into English, there's a 100% chance that they would have used a polysyndeton because they had no commas. Very interesting to me how much this simple verse and so-called bad grammar highlights that this is an actual Hebrew text. This is not an English text derived by someone whose first language was English. This was written by a Hebrew in ancient times prior to punctuation.